Today, we are here to bring you the 10 keys to understanding your keto lifestyle. I'm JJ. I'm a life coach. I eat mostly meat.
I'm Eric. I'm a novelist, and I eat mostly meat.
And the first key to understanding and maintaining your keto lifestyle is really understanding the distinctions in the sort of dietary lifestyles that you'll hear about when you're doing keto. So the first one is paleo. Paleo is an entry point for a lot of people to do keto. They start with paleo and move into keto and then maybe eventually move into carnivore, which we're discussing right now. So paleo is really the idea of ancestral eating, and all of these concepts cover ancestral eating. Paleo, however, really focuses on the elimination of some highly inflammatory things like grains and also dairy. And unless you go primal paleo, which dairy is included in, but most paleo does include grains, doesn't include dairy, and I believe doesn't include legumes either.
No.
So generally speaking, a lot of paleo diets really maintain under 100 grams of carbohydrates. It's not a guideline. It just sort of happens with this ancestral eating.
And then people generally kind of think of they move to keto, which is even more carbohydrate restriction.
Yes.
But it would be the same foods, right?
Generally speaking, yes. In paleo, they're more likely to have starches like sweet potatoes or root vegetables like carrots. Those might fall into a more paleo lifestyle and might be eliminated in the keto lifestyle because they just simply contain too many carbs.
And we're going to talk about why too many carbs is the problem. And then the final one in that kind of spectrum would be carnivore, where you just don't eat any carbs at all because you're just eating meat, eggs, and maybe some butter.
Yeah, carnivore is as close to zero carbs as possible. My understanding, keto is generally between 20 grams to 50 grams. However, it really is where your ketosis level is in that
we're going to
spectrum.
talk about that, I think, next.
Yeah, I think that's our next
It's
key.
important to understand keto because it's short for ketosis or ketogenic, which is a metabolic state that we get into when we restrict carbohydrates from our diet. So there are three macronutrients. There's fat, protein, and carbohydrate. Where would you get protein? A steak. Where would you get fat? A steak. Or a piece of bacon full of fat. But a carb, that's a piece of bread, candy, that's pasta, sweet potato, a potato, and even in broccoli and asparagus, there's carbs in it. There's a lot of fiber in it.
And fruits.
And fruits. Oh, yeah. Apples, bananas, full of sugar, which are carbohydrates. So the reason we want to cut out these carbohydrates to get into ketosis, the metabolic state, is why?
Number 3, our big key is for health purposes, primarily for some sort of physical or mental health purposes.
Yeah. Why would you give up all of the things that are delicious, like spaghetti and ice cream and chocolate malls?
Yeah, spaghetti was my favorite food for most of my life.
Peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah. Well, you might do it because you're experiencing some form of metabolic syndrome. Insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. That might be a reason.
Yeah. And generally, with type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome, your blood sugar is high all the time. And that means your insulin levels, because your pancreas is releasing insulin to try to modulate your blood sugar levels, is high. And it's converting that into fat and storing it in fat on the body. Over time, the body just can't keep up. And you become insulin resistant, and then the blood sugars start going up, and the insulin levels are higher and higher, and it's a very inflammatory state. And it's why people with type 2 diabetes have much higher risk factors for cancer and Alzheimer's and heart disease.
So some other motivations, this is our key 3, for choosing a ketogenic diet might be one, I know I'm familiar with, weight loss. Weight loss might be a reason. Because what happens when you're in ketosis?
Well, you start burning fat, and because you don't have the carbohydrates in your blood, you don't have the glycogen, and so your body just converts right over to taking that fat in the liver, turning it into ketones, and then the muscle and the brain uses that instead of glycogen.
You might do it for an autoimmune disorder.
Yep, many people have.
And then I mentioned earlier mental health issues. If you have a seizure disorder, epilepsy, ketosis has been used for a long time as a strategy for that. And also, I know just in general, it helps mental health issues a lot, depression, anxiety. It can help relieve some of those symptoms as well.
And I've had that result.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of these things happen together. You'll have metabolic syndrome along with some autoimmune issues and IBS and acid reflux. You can treat them individually with a bunch of pharmaceuticals, or you can change your diet and slowly get off of those pharmaceuticals and have a completely transformed life. And that is the choice.
And you've sort of touched on our fourth key, which are some of the benefits of being in ketosis. So again, it manages and helps eliminate even or reverse metabolic syndrome. By lowering your blood sugar, your insulin levels. You use your fat. Fat is a primary fuel source, which is good for your brain. Mm-hmm. It's good for your heart health. And of course, weight loss, as we mentioned. There is a lot of satiety in a ketogenic diet, and that can really reduce how much food you're taking in general.
And why is that?
Why is what?
Why do you have satiety eating keto?
It's the fat, mostly. Well, protein and fat are very satiating. Carbohydrates are not. Carbohydrates do not have the off but.
Okay, I want to divert a little bit here. Many years ago in a previous career, I had a visitor from the UK. This would have been 25 years ago. And we went to a local Italian eatery. And when they brought out the entrees, his eyes got this wide. And he was like, each one of these is enough for a family. Because the serving size was so huge. So much spaghetti. And like a basket full of garlic bread. I loved that place. And I would eat all of it.
We would all clean our plates.
And then I would use the last garlic bread to wipe up all the red sauce, and then I'd eat that. And then I would say, should we go to Dairy Queen?
Sometimes, yeah.
I can't even believe that I used to eat that. There is no way I could do that with a stack of steaks. After a certain bite, you just don't really want to eat another one.
Last night I had to leave some on the plate.
Yeah.
I hit that point.
I'm sure the dogs were very disappointed.
Yeah. Now, do you remember? Now, do you remember, when we first started dating, I wouldn't be able to finish the pasta. I learned how. But I couldn't finish it because I said, I get to this gaggy bite. So when I was young and very metabolically fit and flexible, I actually did have a stopping point with carbohydrates. But as my body became more and more metabolically unhealthy and insulin issues and so forth, insulin sensitivity issues, I could eat the whole plate.
Yeah.
No gaggy bite.
Well, and of course, as we started to be more health conscious and knew that the spaghetti and the garlic bread weren't good for us, there would be this going in this war of like, I want to indulge in it, but I don't want to overindulge in it because it'll make me feel sick and I'll feel maybe guilty. But then in the moment going, well, this is the one time this week. And so I'm just going to go all out and I'm not going to miss a single bite, even if I'm full.
That triggered a really bad cycle with you too, because there was the punishment that came afterwards.
Yeah. I would then have to work out super hard the next day to try to make up for it. Yeah. And then I'd get injured and then I would feel bad and then I would eat comfort food. Cycle. Terrible.
Yeah. Key 5 sort of harkens back to our first one where we talked about the different dietary lifestyles. So we started with paleo. Can that be ketogenic?
It can be ketogenic if you don't eat too many carbs and you eat enough fat.
Yeah. Again, you're looking for probably between 20 grams of carbs to 50 grams of carbs. And more specifically, wherever in that range, you are able to maintain that state of ketosis. So it can be done. And Dr. Eads talks about it. In her most recent book.
Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. We actually did this the first time, intentionally anyway, with the Whole30 program, which was pretty paleo.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes, it was. Yeah. No sugar either. So, yeah. So that's first. And then there is carnivore. as close to zero carbs as possible, where you are eating animal products that mostly, that varies a little bit. And then there's ketovore. Now, we haven't mentioned that yet.
Tell me more about that.
Ketovore is where you are pretty carnivore most of the time, most days, yet sometimes you might put a little onion on your hamburger or a pickle. Or it allows up to about 10 to 20 grams of carbs.
On a day.
In a day.
But not every day.
But not every day. You are really, even if you're ketovore, you are very focused on the animal products.
Because you might have a little side of broccoli or a little salad or something, but then the next day you'd be back to carnivore.
Yeah.
And why do people choose ketovore, though?
Well, I think that if people do have more severe issues with IBS, mental health, all those things we listed earlier, that very often moving to the carnivore side of the spectrum is the best for them because it removes all inflammatory foods. Meat is not inflammatory. So when you remove that, you allow your body to heal. And then once you heal a bit, you may still want to maintain that simplicity and the health benefits of a carnivore diet, yet you can buffer that salad every now and again.
Yeah.
And that gives you a little variety. We're coming up to our sixth key, and I've sort of led into it by talking about these different carbohydrate intakes. And that's the sixth key, is understanding the carbohydrate intakes and ketosis.
Generally speaking, paleo is about 100 grams or less. Keto is generally 20 grams or less. And then ketovore would be 20 grams occasionally. And then carnivore would be basically no carbs except for what happens to be in the meat, which is practically nothing. But different people can eat more carbs and still be in ketosis. And so this is why some people choose to test their ketones. And you can do that a number of ways, but one is there's breath meters. I had a breath meter called the Keto. I don't even know if they still make it. And it kind of gives me a general range. And it's measuring like acetone or something in the breath. There's urine test strips, which are looking for ketones that are in the urine, and those can tell you if you're in ketosis. Probably if you're just starting, you'd be able to see a difference between not being in ketosis and being in ketosis. But the gold standard is blood tests. And there is a device called the Keto Mojo, which I have, that you can get test strips. You do a little finger prick, just like a blood sugar test, and just this little drop of blood, and it'll measure your ketones directly. And that's kind of nice because then you can track it over time and see how diet changes affect it. And you can fine tune how many carbs you can have and still stay in ketosis.
So by definition, a ketogenic diet, you're in ketosis.
Yeah, that's the whole point, is to be in ketosis where you're generating ketones at a level that you're relying on them for your energy. Now, most people do generate some ketones when they're asleep because as you fast, the liver is producing a little bit of it. But to get into ketosis, you're doing carb restriction, and then you're starting to begin running on ketones. And over time, you become adapted, and you get really, like, all of the underlying metabolic gears and wires get reconnected to optimize running on ketones. And then you feel really good.
Yeah, you do. Key number 7, we wanted to include. Some people might not agree with this key, but we felt it was really important because when you're wanting to maintain ketosis, you may still have to manage your cravings for sweets. Now, I know there are some people out there who say, oh no, if you're deep in ketosis or if you're just doing carnivore, your sweet cravings disappear. And I don't know if that's true. I can see most days I don't have them, but sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. And sometimes there's just that celebration where I'm still in the tradition of, wow, I really would like to celebrate my birthday with a little something sweet. So when you're in ketosis, trying to maintain ketosis, what do?
Well, you have a few options. One is to just buck up and not eat them.
Yeah.
And many people do. If you have really dysregulated metabolism, that's probably the choice you need to make. Because that slippery slope, if you have any sort of sweet craving or addiction, you don't really want to go down that path. Others will use artificial sweeteners. some people will think, well, maybe stevia is the safest one because it's a natural leaf sweetener or something out of a stevia plant. But there is risk to that because it does keep the sweet habit going. So there's a certain time every day where I'm like, I want a Zevia drink, which is sweetened with stevia, which tastes terrible if you're coming from sugar. But once you get used to it over the course of months, you're like, oh, that's good.
We call that a delicious nasty.
Yeah, it's nasty, but it's kind of delicious. But it can be a bad habit. But there is some risk with artificial sweeteners. Now, obviously, some are chemicals, and there's some debate about their safety. But there's also this concept of the cephalic phase insulin response to artificial sweeteners.
Yes.
Just anticipating eating something sweet can cause the pancreas to start releasing a little bit of insulin to be ready for the sweetness that's going to come into the system. And then tasting the sweetness will release even more. And there's been studies that have actually measured this and shown the little spike that happens with artificial sweeteners. Now, is it enough to be worried about?
We do use sweeteners sometimes. I'm a moderator, so I don't have the addiction issue, meaning that I can sort of have something and then walk away. It's not a big deal. It doesn't haunt me. Yet I will say this. When I first started my fasting journey, I was having an artificially sweetened energy drink every morning, 0 calories. And I didn't see any results from that. Like, I wasn't seeing any health benefits from fasting or anything. The moment I dropped it, because I went back to my doctor and he's like, I didn't say you could have that. But online they say, if you don't go over 50 calories, you're still fasting. Or if you have a fat bomb, you're still fasting. What happened when I dropped that was that 2 weeks later, my allergies cleared up. So I don't know what that artificial sweetener was doing at that time, but it was doing something that was affecting my body. So I think you need to be careful and just aware of what it's doing for you. And like you said, if you've got some more serious health issue, you might not want to touch it at all. Yeah.
And I think that moves us to key number 8, which is understanding your dietary triggers for certain food choices. And of course, this is big around sweets. Having some sweet potato and then stopping eating the sweet potato after you've reached your 20 grams or whatever your limit is hard for you. It's probably better to just never eat it. Then you're taking yourself into the battle every meal and trying to pull back. And it's very hard to just pull back when it's right there on the plate ready to be eaten.
Yeah.
So sweet and starchy carbs, for me, big triggers, and once I'm eating them, it's really hard to stop, no matter what my intention going in is. So then I might emphasize leafy greens or the bittery, kale and spinach and stuff like that, if I'm choosing to have carbs. However, I've found that they bother my gut. So it's really not worth it, even though I tend to like a salad. Although I kind of like the salad because of the sweet balsamic vinegar that goes on it. And so that can be a little bit of and then you put the candied walnuts on it, and then a few craisins, and pretty soon you've got basically a dessert salad.
Holy cow. No one would call that a dessert salad, but most people wouldn't. But that's what it is. Yeah. Holy cow.
And so for me, going more toward carnivore has been really helpful because now I don't have to worry about it. The decision is already made. When we go grocery shopping, it's not like which berries should we get? How many sweet potatoes should we get? The answer is 0. And I will say that I'm on day 2 of having no stevia sweetened soda. And yesterday it was hard. There was a few little moments where I'm like, ooh, that would be really good right now. But I'm doing an experiment with it. And today was a little bit easier. Now I do have the element. And the element has some sweetness to it.
Yep.
And so that's a little bit of a danger. But I'm not willing to give up my element yet because I want all those electrolytes, which we're going to talk about in a minute.
So we are up to we're to key number 9 already.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Okay. It's really important, I think, for us to understand the true nutritional considerations of keto because it's completely contrary to what we've been told our entire life.
Yeah, like how are you getting your fruits and vegetables, all those really important phytonutrients, and the magical vitamins and minerals that are in kale, spinach, apples, and bananas.
Well, and good grief. I mean, the bottom of the food pyramid is healthy whole grains. So you're not probably eating those. You're not eating those even on paleo.
You're not even getting any fiber.
You're not getting any.
Your gut
barely.
is going to wither up and die if you don't get massive quantities of fiber. Well, I think you can tell by our tone of voice that these arguments don't hold much weight here.
Yeah.
There is some controversy over the necessity of vegetables because, I mean, throughout history, vegetables have always been kind of considered, healthy. And, I mean, it's Popeye and his nasty spinach.
Yeah.
But the truth is there is nothing that isn't in meat that you need.
Now, I was flabbergasted to hear this over and over and over again, but then to also see the different charts that actually show this, because this was nothing that was ever mentioned to us in our life. How did you just state it? You stated
There's
it
nothing that you need that isn't in meat.
that isn't in meat contains everything we need and does it in a better form that's more bioavailable.
Every vitamin, every mineral.
And it contains the fat for those fat-soluble vitamins. I mean, I'm serious.
An ounce of meat may not have as much of a certain vitamin as an ounce of kale or spinach. So when they say that a certain fruit or vegetable is high in something, that is probably true. It's high per gram. It's got a lot of it. That does not necessarily mean that you can absorb all of that, nor does it mean that the vegetables aren't freighted with other things that maybe you don't want.
Anti-nutrients. Yeah.
So I was shocked. We're going to mention this book many more times. Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind by Dr. Eid. She has a whole section on phytonutrients.
Yes.
And I didn't know this because I guess I don't know my Greek, but phyto means plant and nutrients means nutrients. So a phytonutrient is a plant nutrient. The availability of the nutrients that we need from animal products depends on the animal's diet. So if the cow is eating crappy grass, grain, and corn, the nutrients listed on the label next to that animal that should be printed on the side of that cow would be very different than a grass-fed cow in a different area. So there is a possibility of eating carnivore and still needing to supplement.
However, I do want to point out Dr. Berry says even the corn-fed, not properly raised cow is probably better than the standard American diet.
And I would believe that since I eat a lot of steak from Walmart. And I'm doing pretty well. I like the Walmart steaks. They have good suppliers.
So key number 10, you may need some sort of supplementation.
Yeah, you've heard of the keto flu. Might be a sense of malaise. It might be a little nausea, low energy, maybe even some heart palpitations, maybe even a little bit of a rash. I had a keto rash once. It was very strange.
Yeah, I do remember that.
But I was not really supplementing with any electrolytes. And what happens is when you go from the SAD diet to keto, you lose a lot of water weight because that's, part of what's inflammatory effect of that high carb diet that you've been eating. And with that goes a bunch of electrolytes. And so maintaining those levels can require some supplementation. But if you do supplement with it appropriately, the keto flu is either non-existent or very mild in my experience.
So what are some of the electrolytes?
So we're talking about salt, magnesium, potassium in particular. Salt has been vilified. I remember 30 years ago watching an episode of 60 Minutes, and John Stossel, I think his name is, he did an expose on salt, and he basically showed that salt was not the criminal that everybody said it was, unless you already had high blood pressure. In which case, more salt generally increased your blood pressure. But the advice for people with high blood pressure to limit salt is the wrong thing to limit.
Yeah.
The thing to limit is carbs.
Yeah.
Because they're what cause you to retain all of that water, and that makes your blood pressure go up. My blood pressure was kind of inching up. And when I went keto, it just went poof.
It was incredible.
It just reverted to being great. And I eat a ton of salt.
Yes, we do eat a lot of salt.
You put salt on that meat to season it, and you want to because it makes it delicious. And I drink a electrolyte mix called Element, LMNT. We are not sponsors, and we don't have any links to it.
No.
But it's reasonably tasty, and it gives some magnesium, potassium, and 1 gram of salt. So some people on keto might need to take in 5 grams of salt, which seems crazy.
Well, and I know that I have also been supplementing with iodine.
Yes.
Dr. Berry recommended it first, and then I got Dr. Elizabeth Bright's book on iodine and the thyroid health, especially for women. Every cell in the body needs iodine, and because of the state our farming is in, with our fields being over-farmed and not naturally replenished, we have a situation where there is not a lot of iodine in the soil, especially where we live in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
Near the seashores, there's still enough iodine.
So there's supposedly a lot of iodine in eggs, but it still depends. The chickens need access to the iodine.
Yeah.
And so depending on what they're fed, there may not be that much iodine in it.
Yeah. So those are the things that are majorly recommended to supplement when you're on keto. Is there anything else you know of?
The demand for vitamin C is higher on a higher carb diet. And so when you're eating carnivore, you're getting enough vitamin C from your diet to meet your needs because you don't have all those carbs to metabolize.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that was kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh, the other one probably doesn't matter if you're eating SAD or carnivore or keto, but vitamin D is probably another one, just based on where you live.
We live in Wisconsin. We supplement with vitamin D. So we've given 10 keys to understanding and maintaining a keto lifestyle. I think we need to sort of simplify. Let's strip some of that back now. So if they're new.
If you're new and you're like going, I don't know if I should do paleo, keto, or carnivore, it's still, I don't know which one to choose. Well, it would basically be, where are you starting from? Do you have type 2 diabetes? Do you have a lot of autoimmune issues? Do you have a lot of weight to lose? I would go straight to carnivore. And the way to start it is beef, bacon, butter, and eggs. And do that for 30 to 90 days. Dr. Berry would say 90. He's probably right. I had no patience. I did it for 30. Probably should have kept doing it. But I'm back on it. That's what I'm doing right now. And the results are so fast, kind of crazy, how quickly the human body goes, oh, that's what I always wanted. Thanks. Now we can feel good.
It is a really strange.
Yeah.
I know when we were on our recent cruise, we had whatever meat was available and tried to eat some beef, but quality issues and who knows. But anyway, we came home and I remember eating that first steak, and it was like you just said, oh, my body was just like, oh.
Yeah. So that the carnivore would be where I'd start if I had a lot of issues. Now, if I had 30, 40, 50 pounds to lose, but I didn't have diabetes, I didn't necessarily have any autoimmune issues, I would probably go to keto and just keep my carbs under 20 and see how I did. If I wasn't particularly overweight, but I was having maybe some energy issues and maybe starting to get a little gut problems, I would try paleo because it's the most generous with carbs, and just kind of find out whether you can tolerate it. But that might be a paleo where you're doing specific restrictions on certain foods, like maybe legumes for a while or dairy for a while. Nuts can be a big issue.
Nuts can be a big gut issue. Whether you are paleo or carnivore or keto in the middle, or even ketovore, focusing mostly on your protein, on your meats, on your eggs, on your animal products is probably best. Not only for the from the health standpoint, but also mentally, it's just simpler. It's simpler when most of your plate is made up of meat and you just have that little side of a veg.
Yep. What do you say to the people for whom beef is just gag to think about it?
Well, first of all, I would say you can have other meats. So go ahead, do it. Even though beef is strongly recommended and other red meats, have other meats. That's fine. And learn how to cook the beef.
It makes a big difference.
It makes a huge difference that you are not just cooking the crud out of your meat.
And which cut is a good bang for the buck?
A chuck roast is pretty decent for that. A chuck roast, and which is very easy to cook and just maintain temperature and time. Keep track of your temperature and time. Put some salt on it and throw it in the oven and just let it sit till it comes up to the right temperature. Okay. So that's pretty easy. And ground beef is also a pretty good, easy, cheap. But again, don't overcook it. If you overcook it, it's going to turn into sawdust.
I think a little bit of mustard is okay to if you really struggle with the flavor of beef. I went through a period where I could only eat beef with dipping it in a little mustard. I'm now past that, and no problem. But that might be another way. Not ketchup. Ketchup is full of sugar.
Yes. Let us know which one of these keys resonates the most with you or you have the most experience with. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you have any questions, we can maybe address in our next video.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Next time.